Hi, this is JP Newman on Investing on Purpose, and today we are interviewing Britt Lefkoe of the Lefkoe Method. Britt is a dear friend and a coach that has changed my life, and I wanted to share her brilliance with you. Britt has a clear premise as part of the Lefkoe Method. We all have imprinted, basically software that starts when you're a child, your beliefs, and it's amazing to see how much of what we do in business are around those fixed beliefs. With Britt today, we're going to explore not only identifying what those fixed beliefs are, but how you can quickly and easily change those beliefs, update them to more empowering ones, which will have a massive impact on your life and your business. Come join me for this fun adventure with Britt today. I promise you will leave with 5 questions that you can ask yourself as part of this method that can change your life. Welcome to Investing on Purpose. I'm JP Newman, your host, and on this show, we're here to educate and inspire you to create the maximum impact for your business and life. You're going to hear from dynamic entrepreneurs who have created outsized returns by bringing purpose into their businesses. The mission of the show is to help you integrate your business and personal goals so that you can live life to the fullest. Enjoy the show.
Well, hi, this is JP Newman on Investing on Purpose, and welcome to season 2. And boy, do I have a treat for you today. You are going to meet one of my dear friends and coaches that really have excelled me in my life, and I get to share her with you. We have Britt Lefkoe with us. Britt, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. You are a hidden treasure that I get to share with the audience, and I'm super excited with that.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So Britt and I met about 2.5 years ago. There's a group called Baby Bathwater, and one of our dear friends, Raj, and I were chatting one day, and he's like, dude, my life has totally changed. I met this coach. She does integration for like the top people in Silicon Valley. She's like the tech coach, 20 years experience. She's completely amazing, and she's changing my life. She's literally going in, JP, I know this sounds woo-woo, but she's going in and she's editing my beliefs and giving me I'm getting rid of old beliefs and have an entire new framework with beliefs. You got to check her out. I'm like, come on. And of course, to me, people say, check out a lot of things. They're like, yeah, I'll check her out. And he kept saying to me, I'm like, yeah, I'll get to it. He's like, you got to call Britt now. And finally, we had the greatest first conversation. I remember our first conversation, and it really was an introduction to your work. And, with the Lefkoe Method, founded by your father, Morty Lefkoe. And really, from what I know, that your dad was really a researcher and a pioneer. And then from what I know, you've really taken it to another level. He took it to a certain level and kind of got this idea of am I just stuck in beliefs? Or is there a way that I can actually break from all that stuff that in my subconscious and actually work for more empowering frameworks? And you've taken that to a whole other level. So Britt, first of all, I just want to personally thank you for the coaching that you've done for me and that we continue to do. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for helping me just have more access to my tools and my greatness. And really, I could go on and on with what you've done. Can we just start talking about there's very few people who do your work as this integration and really deep belief work. Obviously your dad started. Tell us your story. How'd you get into this?
So right around the time that I was born, my dad created a process to help people shift limiting beliefs. My dad was a management consultant. His background was in business. And his kind of burning question was, if I get paid to give advice that people say is great advice, why do they not implement it? Right? Why do you go back to a company who has raved about the advice you've given them, and then you see so few changes? What is that? And what my dad realized is that the reason why we don't change is because our beliefs are in the way. So if you believe that if I make a mistake or fail, I'll be rejected, no matter how much mistakes are important, you will have an aversion to mistakes, right? That we might know that perfectionism is super unhelpful, but if you believe that your worth and value is tied to being perfect, you'll still be stuck in those patterns. So no matter how many books you read telling you the steps and the tools, if your beliefs are in the way, you will not take the good advice. And so my dad developed this absolutely brilliant process that I was obsessed with in my childhood. I was like, this is it, right, JP? I'm like, this is the tool. This is going to change the world. But there was a kind of curveball, and it worked for everyone. But there was one person it didn't work for, and that person was me. And my brain almost like kind of developed around it because I learned about it from such a young age. And so I was stuck. And so I was doing this work. I was working with clients, but I struggled with this integrity issue. I'm like, how come I can help everyone else? And, I'm watching my clients soar past me and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But I was stuck. And so I walked away from this work for a while and really started asking the question, what do I need? And how can I evolve this work so that it works for me? How can I do this work with a deeper level of integrity? And when my dad died about 7 years ago, I really, really dug into this journey of my dad didn't want me to just get his work into the world. It's like my dad's dream was to evolve the work. And so to really transform it into something that, stand on the shoulders of giants. My dad was a giant and he didn't want me to stand by his side. He wanted me to stand on his shoulders. So I really evolved the work in this way to where it's mine now, right? And I will always honor him, but it's been a really incredible process to find my voice and kind of use my gifts, kind of honoring my dad's legacy.
That's amazing, Britt. And I can, I'm happy to share, some people by the way tease me. They say I have too many coaches in my life because I've had sleep coaches. We've had Tristan on the show. Tristan was my original purpose and why coach. But, you really came at a really interesting time. We talk a lot on the show about, manifestation as if it's some magical thing or, why some people like they try hard. And I'm a great story. I tried a lot of things and I couldn't get like my businesses to work. Everything was just harder for me. And I really didn't have any really idea that I had all these beliefs from childhood that were still running my operating system and that there was any tool to edit them. And I know a lot of people these days, they think, because as we know, there's this psychedelic renaissance that you take a pill, you have this amazing peak experience where you, at least for the first time, you get to glance into like belief work or maybe beliefs that you've had. But then you come down from the experience and you want to go back to the peak experience. But there isn't always transformation. As I went on my journey in those experiences, like what do you see in your work? Like, can you talk more about that and beliefs, how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So, psychedelic experiences can be very transformational, but the challenge is when you come back down, like you said, your operating system still is your old belief system. So I think a helpful way to think about it is if you do a functional MRI scan of somebody making decisions, what you find is that 95% of the brain activity is in the amygdala. The amygdala is where your belief systems live, right? The belief systems that drive your amygdala are typically locked in by the age of 7. Only 5% of your brain power is your prefrontal cortex, right? That's your imaginative brain. That's your reason. That's your logic. That's your creativity. So what happens is we get an idea. I want this thing. That's our prefrontal cortex. But then it's our amygdala that drives the behavior to help us reach that goal. And if those belief systems are old and stale and limiting, right, no matter how much we dream into what we want, the system that actually drives our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are limited. So we have these amazing experiences where we go and we do psychedelics and we do all these things and we're able to see what's possible. We're sometimes able to see our beliefs, right? In the harder experiences, you see your limitations. In the easier experiences, you see what's possible. But in neither of those cases are you actually shifting those limiting beliefs. So when you come back down, either you know your blocks, but you don't know how to get over them, or you know what's possible, but you don't know how to walk toward that, right? So it actually is missing the engine. And integration is the engine, right? Psychedelics give you vision, but they lack the engine. And from my perspective, the engine is the belief work, right? The engine is actually shifting those limiting beliefs so that your thoughts, feelings, and behavior are consistent with your vision.
Yeah. Britt, I don't mind sharing, some of the things that really were incredible. It was actually our first call together. I remember you had me, if it's okay to talk about some of the process, you had me close my eyes and go back to a part of my childhood when I was very young. And I remember in the first thing together, I was feeling very lonely, if you remember. And I remember, and you said, where did this loneliness start from for you, JP? Because I realized I've had a whole compensation around not wanting to be lonely. It comes up in dreams. the way I dated, the way I do things is there's a thing around loneliness. And we got back to, I thought I found it. I'm like, oh, this was me at 9. You're like, go back further. I'm like, well, this is me at 7. You're like, deeper. And I actually got to the 5-year-old who was alone after school. My parents were gone and no one was home. And I hated being alone. And at that age, it didn't make sense. It wasn't logical, but I felt a little bit abandoned, even though it really wasn't abandonment. My parents just worked. But it shocked me, even from our first session together, how much I had threaded in my belief based on a 5-year-old that was feeling somewhat lonely and abandoned and still using parts of that operating system as a mature, hopefully wise elder man, and how much that was setting me back.
Yeah, it is absolutely wild, right? You think about your worldview and we assume that it's an adult worldview. But again, if 95% of your brain power is driven by a part of your brain that's for the most part locked in by 7, most of your decision-making power, most of your operating system is not adult, it is child. And that's why addressing the childhood is paramount, right? Because none of the belief systems that you're struggling with are adult belief systems, they're child belief systems, and children lack context. We don't understand abstractions. We don't understand concepts, neat, tidy, respectful, quiet. We don't understand work. We don't understand responsibility. So because we lack context, right, we talk about the ego, and a lot of the time it feels very Freudian and confusing, right? It doesn't need to be confusing. It really is just that we don't understand cause and effect outside of ourselves. So if there is some sense of disharmony, the idea that it's because adulthood can be stressful and our parents didn't have the tools or they worked, right? We don't have that. So all we can see is it's because of me, right? That there's something about me, or this is the way life is, right? Like with the loneliness, it's like, this is me, who I am. My identity is tied to this loneliness because if I look up every day and this is how I feel, well, it must be me, right? So the way that our brain develops is just so unbelievably limited because of the stage of development that we're at. And so being able to retrain your brain, right? You're utilizing the neuroplastic nature of your brain to shift your identity. And I think one of the things that I'm like such a stand for, right, is I listen to people talk about where they are and where they want to be and how they're going to become that person. That feels like a lot of work to me, right? If like who I am and who I want to become, if there's a chasm that I have to cross, that's hard work. That's a lot of repetition, right? That can be scary. It can create, I need this and I need that. In my mind, you don't have to create that person in the future. You can create it in the past. So by going back and retraining your brain that instead of the stories you created and instead of the emotional anchors you have, you can actually create the person you want to become in your past. You can plant those seeds. And when that identity shifts, everything shifts organically. You don't have to work at it. You don't have to become that person. You've always been that person. You just need to train your brain to understand the stories that create that identity.
Yeah, no, I was always like, we would go and you'd always say, go to your current self or go to your 30-year-old self. And, if you could look back, I remember on that particular thing, we went back and you said, hey, if you could see who you became at your old and you could talk to that kid and have a conversation with the kid who was lonely and doing all that stuff. And it sounds so basic, but the idea that like, hey, it's all going to be okay. Like you've got this more than you think, whether it's a bully, because I remember I had a bully in mine that had a huge impact on loneliness and all these stuff that you're dealing with, but going back and having the assurance of, hey, you've got this as an older age. Like the story works out well. It may not be happily ever after, but it's your version of happily ever after. And, and it's very subtle, Britt, but I also really appreciated from you. I think a lot of people are on, whether it's psychedelics or other journeys where it has to be hard. I'm going to do the biggest journey of my life. I'm gonna trip out and vomit for 3 days in the Peruvian, it was shamans in Peru, and that's awesome if you want to vomit with shamans in Peru. But I know you said to me, and it was really hard for me to understand in the beginning of your work, like this doesn't have to be hard, JP. You'd say this doesn't have to be hard. It's simply, truly, you have an edit. You have the power to edit your beliefs and update them from the ones you had at 3, 5, 7, 10, 14, 20 versus who you are today and getting them up to speed. And of course, I was a little reluctant because it seemed too good to be true. And we did many sessions together, and I would say that my experience of it is it's incredible work. And it's funny when you live with your own operating system, it's subtle how you just things don't upset you or things don't trigger you the same way. Or like, I know for me, I don't know how much, well, I'll be personal. I know for me, one of the things about being lonely, it kind of like led to this idea of having to sell people, whether it was friends or when I was dating, like to be a certain kind of person. And I noticed after our sessions, like I didn't have that same, I call it the side hustle, but around certain people or around attractive women or around this, like the side hustle was just kind of gone. It was like this very quiet thing. So like you could miss it if you weren't paying attention to what you're actually trying to create, because it's subtle, but incredibly powerful at the same time.
I love that you said subtle. It brought up two things for me. The first one is we think what we want is something big, but what we really want is just to not feel how we feel. And it's the idea that if you hurt your ankle, it's not that you want $100 million. You just want your ankle to not hurt, right? And so we think we create these grandiose stories because so often our pain, our frustration, our discomfort is so big. We think we need an equal and opposite reaction. I need something so big to make up for the fact that I have this huge gaping wound. All you want is to feel better. When you feel better, everything changes. Everything is easy, right? And I think that the example of like, again, like if your ankle hurts, when your ankle stops hurting, you don't walk around being like, oh, remember back when my ankle used to hurt, or I'm so glad my ankle doesn't hurt. It's your new normal. And so up leveling is not about this big production. It's about getting really, really clear on the specific things that if they changed, your entire life would change, right? The sense of who you are in the world would change, right? And if there's something, like you said, that idea of the side hustle, that if I walk around feeling like I have to impress everybody, like that's tiring. That really takes away from my ability to be authentic. That takes away from meaningful relationships. It's stressful. It focuses, my attention here in business or there. When that goes away, think about how dramatic of a difference is that creates in your life. And yet at the same time, like you said, it's very subtle. The only thing is I stopped trying to impress people. So I really think that so often we're looking for this like big dramatic thing. The reality is we want relief. We just want relief. And relief is unbelievably subtle because when you get it, the payoff is that you just naturally step in to your best authentic self. But it's not surprising. It's not like, whoa, look at me being so authentic. You're just being yourself. So I think the word subtle is so important. And the other thing
there is so there's one thing, Britt, that we didn't talk about though within your process, and maybe you'll talk about it more. During your sessions, you really you anchor on emotion. So because a lot of people, especially us men, we tend to be very much in our head. And I know a lot of your process is trying to get to the root feeling when you were a kid. And then what do you want the root feeling to be now? And then, so your anchor is kind of, you bring, like I know for me, it's like you bring it down into a visualization, but it seems like the visualization is very much based, you try to get into a feeling tone as opposed to a thinking tone. Am I saying that right? Or
yeah.
Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, it's a different part of your brain, right? Like we say brain like it's one thing, right? The brain is very much divided into different, you can think of it as resources or different responsibilities. So the thinking brain, in a lot of ways, you can think of as your prefrontal cortex, right? The feeling is your amygdala, right? If you look at which is the part of your brain that drives behavior, it's not your thinking brain, it's your feeling brain. So ultimately, what you think doesn't really matter because what you think doesn't drive behavior. It doesn't matter how good you are at thinking. Your thinking doesn't drive behavior. Your feeling does. You cannot think your way out of a problem. You can only feel your way out of a problem. And the reason why is because your feeling will lead to your behavior. And so part of why it's so important to understand the emotions is that if you have an emotional block, you will not act. And the reason why is it's how your brain develops around safety. Your brain will perceive negative emotions through the lens of this isn't safe. And because we are self-protective creatures, we won't do the thing. Again, going back to this idea of putting yourself out there, right? It's a perfect example. If you on some level believe I'm an imposter, I'm not good enough, I'm a fraud, and if I put myself out there, I'll be exposed, You might realize in order to have a successful business, you have to put yourself out there. But the brain is not designed to make you happy or successful. The brain is designed to keep you safe. And if your worth and value feels at risk, your brain perceives that as a threat to your survival. So again, if you know making mistakes and failing is important, putting myself out there is important, being authentic is important, it doesn't matter. If your brain perceives that thing to be unsafe, you will not do it. Your brain's responsibility is to keep you safe, not to make you happy or successful. So it's really, really important to get to the root of where it is that it's creating a sense of unsafety. And when you can, again, utilize the neuroplastic nature of the brain to help your brain see that the thing is safe, you'll naturally do it.
So Britt, along that, I know a lot of people who are listening to the show, a lot of times we're talking about, manifesting as entrepreneurs. How do we manifest great business outcomes? And for a lot of people, number one is, this is a business. I want to make sure it's going to work. And of course, as you know, on this show, we're saying, hey, make sure you're infusing your why into your how and that it all works. But a lot of people, they don't think they're great manifestors. They don't understand. I mean, look, I went years before I figured I had many failures before, probably way too many failures based on my belief system, not realizing how much my belief system was even affecting my ability to manifest. And tell me more about manifesting purpose or manifesting what you want in a business. How does it get stuck and how do you unstick it in a really practical way for those who are listening to the show?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. So where do we get stuck in manifesting? You cannot manifest things that, not cannot, but for the most part, it's very, very challenging to manifest something that goes against your beliefs. An example, if you have a block around deserving, right? And you say, I want to manifest receiving all of this abundance, there's a part of your brain that feels undeserving, you're now blocked, right? Because manifesting is more than just energy. From my perspective, yes, there is, of course, there's all the woo-woo stuff, there's all the quantum physics, there's all the energy. Yes, that's great. I don't really think that's what you and I need to talk about today. From my perspective, a lot of manifesting is behavioral. So if I want to manifest a particular outcome, one, I have to be open to those opportunities and I have to act in a way that's consistent with me reaching whatever goals I want to reach. I'm going to use an example. Let's say that I'm starting a new business, I'm an entrepreneur, and what I want is to hit a certain goal. If let's say I'm trying to get capital and I'm at an investor meeting, and if I have beliefs like I'm not good enough, or, people don't believe in me, or no matter what I do, it's never going to be good enough. And I present and they say, hey, Britt, that was a really great presentation. You're not what we're looking for. I am likely to respond by saying, see, I knew I wasn't good enough. And what am I going to do? I'll either go into a spiral. I'll give up. I'll throw the business in the trash, right? It's that behavior that leads to the lack of my outcome. In contrast, if I have a set of beliefs like I'm capable of getting what I want, I'm competent, even if things don't work out my way in the beginning, I always manage to get to what I want, I will, at the end of that meeting, walk over, pull the guy aside and say, hey, I'm just really interested for the future. I'd love some feedback. What was it about my pitch that didn't excite you? Get that feedback, listen to that feedback, go home, up-level your pitch, and then go back out. So it's not even necessarily some woo-woo, things fall out of the sky, I imagine the red car and the red car shows up. My beliefs are impacting how I show up in the world. A lot of manifesting from my perspective is action-oriented. It's not falling out of the sky. You're walking toward what you want. But if everything is a roadblock, at some point, right, you don't get there. And so I think what people miss is it's not just about thinking the thoughts, it is behaving in accordance with those thoughts. And if you have blocks and limitations that your worth and value, or again, if I make a mistake, it means I'm an idiot. Now you're looking at yourself as an idiot. You're not going after the same opportunities. Even just on a basic level, JP, the difference of who I pitch to. If I have a belief that no matter what I do, it's not good enough, do you think I'm going to call my ideal buyers? Right? Do you think I'm going to call the best investor? Right? Am I going to go to Andreessen Horowitz if I believe that I'm not that great? No. Right? But if I have that conviction, I want to tell a really quick story. part of where I realized this in my own life, there were certain places that I had a lot of confidence and certain places I lacked confidence. But the one place that I have always had confidence is in this. It's like, I know that I know how to change people's behavior without a shadow of a doubt. And I've known that since I'm like 5 years old. Like I've just gotten this. And I had a practice doing this. I was in my early 20s and I was like, I need more business experience. Like I need to be in a corporate environment or in a tech environment. Like I need to know more. So I decided that I was going to get a job in tech. And there was a company, it was a hyper growth tech startup. It was like the hottest company in San Francisco. And I was talking to a recruiter and she's like, I'm going to be honest, like they don't take anyone, don't get your hopes up. They had one position. I looked at the job description. I was in love. It was for a director level role. They required 10 years of experience in the field. JP, I had never had a real job. The only thing I had ever done was this work. I had never had a real job. They wanted 10 years of experience in the field. I had never worked in tech. I didn't even know what an API was. I applied for the job. I went through 9 rounds of interviews. And at the last interview, I sat with who would become my boss. And he was like, so we're still a private company. We talked to the board of directors. They said, there's no chance that they can give you this job. I said, okay. And they said, so I fought with him and I said, what if we change the title and we give her the job? And they said, fine. So I got the job, right? When I look at this example, the thing that stands out to me was I never would have gone after that. Right? I never would have gone after, who in the world goes for a role that wants 10 years of experience when you have 0? But I had conviction, right, in what I was doing. And so I stepped outside of the bounds of what was normal. And I think the thing that delineates the high achievers, the people who make it, right, it's these belief systems that enable them to skip 15 steps, right? To go to the right people, to put themselves out there, to have a clear and concise message. It's these internal belief systems, these limitations that keep us stuck. And then we call it manifestation, but really I manifested the job, but it wasn't just energy. I manifested the job by applying. I manifested the job by having a really serious conversation with the person who's going to be my boss. And I said, here's all the reasons why you're probably not going to why you're not going to want to hire me, right? These are all the things that are probably going through your mind. These are all the reasons why you think you want someone else and why you're wrong. This is why you want me. And I fought for it. That's manifesting, right?
So Britt, let me ask you a question. Working with as many clients as you've worked, I know you've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. What are the most common, with entrepreneurs particularly, what are the most common negative beliefs that you notice that block? I mean, and the clients that have succeeded, what was replaced? What was the positive belief that was replaced that finally unlocked them to their success? Like what have you seen?
I love this question. Such a good question, JP. So one of the most common is I'm an imposter. That is such a common belief amongst entrepreneurs. And I think what an underlying kind of shift is we typically think that there are things that are easy and hard. Right? When we get easy and hard are not like a thing that exists. It's an experience. There are some people, if you're really good at it, it's easy. If you're really bad at it, it's hard. When you're able to shift your identity to understand early in life what you were good at and what was easy, you start to create an identity of, if it's easy, it's probably my superpower. If it's easy, it's probably my genius zone. Let me follow this. And you start to see your identity differently and understand that the things that are easy are this message, right? It's like the megaphone being like, do this, you are uniquely good at this. So the I'm an imposter is such a block for entrepreneurs. I'm not good enough is right next to it. I'm not good enough is one of the most common beliefs. Very often that comes from feeling criticized, right? Feeling like I didn't do a good enough job early in life. Again, like there's a really important shift in getting. We often think there's a right way and a wrong way, right? That if we do it the right way, it's good. If we do it the wrong way, it's bad. When we there was our parents' way and our way. Our parents' way wasn't the right way. It was just their way. And when we start to take ownership over, you didn't do it wrong, you did it your way. And so when people can connect to, oh my God, like I was already developing my way at 3, 4, 5 years old, like that's really powerful. I've been developing my way my whole life. This is my way. A lot of that identity shifts. And it's so cool watching people shift these beliefs like I'm not good enough and I'm an imposter, because they're so damaging. And when they go away, watching the conviction, the confidence, it's like the whole body language shifts, everything changes, the whole identity changes. So I think those are two of the most common. The third one that I just want to note is about mistakes and failure, that it's typically something like, if I make a mistake or fail, I'll be rejected, I'll be humiliated, I'll look stupid, people will think I'm not credible. That's also a really important.
Gotcha. And Britt, so how would you describe the replacement beliefs? Like, what is, when someone gets to the next step, what are the affirmative beliefs that people have? Like, you talk about this interview, and I'm thinking about, a lot of that was self-confidence that you were capable of doing it. But what, if you were to label that, what label would you give to those positive beliefs?
Yeah, I think that one of them is, and it's, I'm going to half answer your question, but it's the idea that my way is just as valid as any other way. Like, we're all just coming into the world with our way. And it's not that there's one way that's better than another. It's just our way. And I think that it's really taking ownership that your way is your unique gift, your unique superpower, your genius zone, right? And when you give yourself permission, instead of trying to do it someone else's way, right? Instead of trying to compare whose way is this and who did that and they were successful that way, it's very hard to be successful doing it someone else's way. It's just hard, right? You're fighting against gravity. When you give yourself permission to do it your way, that's when I see people achieve escape velocity. And it's so exciting because people really get clear on, okay, I see my gifts now. Because you're blocked from seeing your gifts when you're trying to do it 7 habits for this, 10 habits for that, right?
Well, exactly. You start to intellectual. I really love what you said about flow, like really kind of knowing really knowing your gifts and then embracing them, as opposed to just struggling because you've read so many books and you think this is the blueprint for everybody. So 7 steps to X, 9 steps to this. To your point, really isn't exploring your personal genius. That is more of a mental construct than actually like really navigating through your own personal genius.
Yeah, and I think those are the people that stand out. It's like there's a million stories you can tell about, Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, but I think the clearest part is they're in their genius, right? Whatever story you want to tell, they are in their unique genius zone. They do things their way. They don't do things someone else's way. And I think that's such a missing piece for entrepreneurs, is they're trying to build a business rather than trying to figure out what their unique way of doing things is and build a business around that. One of the things that has made me the most successful is I never tried to build a business. I have a business. I have a very successful business, but I didn't build a business. I did what I do in a way that no one else can do it. I live in my genius zone, and I authentically allowed my business to almost build itself around me, right? It's like I almost allowed my business to be a reflection of my genius zone. And I think that's where so many entrepreneurs fall off, is if you're trying to do things someone else's way, you tap out of, it's funny, JP, people talk about flow state, like how do you get into flow? I live in flow. I'm in flow like 95% of the time because my genius zone is direct access to flow. Because I'm in my genius zone 95% of the time in my business, I'm always in flow. When I step out of my genius zone, I notice it because I'm working hard and I'm not in flow, right? And that's my wake-up call.
So, Britt, let me ask you, very few people that I met some very interesting folks on the planet talk about being in their flow state 95% of the time. That's pretty, and I know you mentioned that to me on several occasions. And knowing you, I know it to be true because I know you that well. This isn't some like show promotion. So if you were to talk to the audience, how do you, I know you have to get to the belief work, but this idea of being more in your flow and your personal genius, obviously you need to do some of the belief work, but do you have any steps? Like, can we even do an exercise now? Is there something? Because I think for a lot of people, on my last episode, on episode 20, I had Mickey on, and Mickey has her own way of getting her own personal genius. That was awesome. I've had Philip Michael on. So we're talking about how everybody has a different way of gaining. But what you really start to realize, and I've realized it from even feedback from the show, is a lot of people we're so in our heads and we're so instructed how to do things that seems like it's so abstract. Do you have anything you could help us with? Any techniques or maybe something we can even do now?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important things is your genius zone is there waiting. The problem is not that you have to figure out what it is. The problem is that you have to figure out what the block is. So one thing you can do, and we can go through this together, right? So one exercise I would encourage you to do to figure out what your blocks are, close your eyes and imagine your dream business, right? You are thriving, you're highly successful, you are exceeding every single one of your goals. What is the first doubt that comes up? that's your block, right? It's going to be something like, that's not for me. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'll never get there. I don't deserve that. It's going to be too hard. That's your block.
Mine was I was just thinking about the next step because I'm working on 2.0 of my business. And the first thing that came to me was, it's hard. It's going to be hard.
Right. That is what you work on. Do not worry about your purpose. Do not worry about your vision. Worry about your block. Because when you get rid of the block, you will naturally step into your purpose and your vision. I think so often we focus on the wrong thing. Focus on your block, fix your block. And a really useful tool is, so now we know this block, right? It's hard, right? Get really clear what the block is, that doing something big, right? Put language to it. It's like, oh, well, the thing I did before, maybe that didn't need to be hard because it was a 1.0, but to really get to that level, it's hard. Or it might be work is hard, everything is hard, growth is hard, money is hard. Get really clear on what it is, and then try to figure out, where did this come from? Where did you see this, right? Was it you watched a parent work really hard? You watched a parent struggle? Was it when you decided to become an entrepreneur, you did 15 courses and read 100 books and they all told you that it needed to be hard? Where did you learn that it was going to be hard, right? And go back. And I want to keep this general because I want everybody listening to be able to kind of go through this, right? Figure out where you found this, right? Because it's like you discovered it. You weren't born with it.
How do you do that though, Britt? Like, I know with you and I, it's easy because you kind of you do this eyes closed and you kind of go through a meditation. You're really good at guiding you. And a lot of times I would mention something to you and you'd say, go deeper or go younger. How do you do that internally? How would you do that process?
Look for one of two things. One, what was either, so you think of a parent or a primary caregiver, right? Whoever basically raised you, what was their relationship to the thing that came up to you, right? Came up for you. So even an example, if it's like, I'm not good enough for that, did your mom have that belief? Did your dad have that belief, right? Did a primary caregiver have that belief? Because sometimes you can look at it kind of through osmosis, that our parents are mirrors. We look at them and we see ourselves. With parenting, we often think how we treat our kids. It's not just how we treat our kids, how we treat ourselves. So if my mother wasn't good enough, why in the world would I be, right? So one way you can look is, did one of your parents have this belief? Another thing you can look at is, did I feel this way with my parent? So did I feel not good enough? So if I spilled orange juice on the floor, did I feel not good enough? So either did they have this belief or did I feel this way with them? If it's hard, it could be, yes, my dad was always working or my mom was always struggling. So I saw that things were hard for them, or it felt really hard for me. Like no matter what I did, I would clean and clean and clean. And it was always, you missed this one thing, and that felt hard. So either did my parents have this belief or did I feel this way with them? So that's the way to figure out the source. That's the way to figure out where it came from. The second thing you want to do, and this is the kind of the game changer. Very often we want to try to convince ourselves that what we thought wasn't true. That doesn't work. You're using the wrong part of the brain. Prefrontal cortex versus amygdala. You cannot think your way out of a feeling. You can only feel your way out of a feeling. Beliefs are not thoughts. They're feelings, right? They are stored in the amygdala. They are processed as feelings, not as thoughts. Don't think your way out of it. Create a different feeling.
Okay, so Britt, I do get this, but when you talk about you can't think your way out of a thought, that it's a feeling, can you architect that for me using the example I just gave you?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to say first what you don't want to do. What you don't want to do is say, no, that's not true. Or I don't want to feel that way, or no, it's really easy, because you're thinking, right? You can't think your way out of a feeling. You can only feel your way out of a feeling. So let me give you an example of how I might work through this, right? So let's say we see that something is hard. Let's say that we watched our parents struggle, right? And we said, that's hard, right? So of course it's going to be hard, right? Does that work? Does that kind of fit? Like you watch your parents struggle and the feeling is that's really hard. So it's hard. The way that you feel your way out of a feeling instead of think your way out of a feeling, ask yourself the question, what would I have needed to know to have a different feeling? What insight would I have needed to have, not to think differently, but to actually have a different feeling? So let me use an example. An example would be something like, wow, like when it works, it's easy. When it doesn't work, it's hard. Everything they're doing isn't working. They're not doing things the easy way. When it doesn't work, of course it's hard, right? That's what efficiency is all about. When it doesn't work, it's hard. So to literally be able to watch your parents and be like, God, I wish they knew how to do it, right? It's like, I wish they knew how to do it differently so that they could experience it being easy. That creates an entire different feeling. And the way you know it, your body language changes, the smile on I can see the smile on your face, right? It's like the facial expression changes, your energy changes, everything changes because you're holding on to a feeling. It's not the thought that's causing the problem. It's the feeling. It's a completely different part of your brain. You can't heal with your prefrontal cortex. You can only heal with your amygdala. So what's happening is you have to ask yourself this question, and I want to just repeat it again for your audience because I want everyone to be able to do this at home, right? Ask yourself the question, what insight would I have needed to have created a different feeling, right? When you get that, you will think of the insight and your entire feeling will shift, and that's how you know it changes. That's how you know it's gone. So I want to just recap really quickly what we did, right? Visualize your business thriving. You have exceeded your goals. Q1 blew all your numbers out of the water. You are on top of everything. Everything's running smoothly. You are so excited. Now look, what is the first block that came up for why that's not possible, why it's not going to happen, right? Whatever that is, that's the thing you have to work on. Do not worry about your purpose. Do not worry about your goals. Do not worry about your vision. Worry about your block because the block is the thing that is in the way. Now, figure out where that block came from, right? Either one of your parents had it in themselves or it's how you felt with them, right? Then go back and ask yourself the question, what insight would I have needed in order to feel differently? Think of the insight, notice the feeling. What I watched with JP, I watched him smile. He had this lightness. All of a sudden you got really, really light. You had this big smile on your face, your shoulders relaxed. It was like this whole transformation happened. Now all of a sudden, when you think about that, you'll notice that block is gone. That creates.
That's amazing. You know, even Britt, just step one of actually it was good for me because I think I know so many things of just stepping into what does it feel like, not what does it look like, but what does it feel like, and if things just weren't running, because I'm now I am, I've had great financial success, the company's doing great. Like as I go into 2.0, I realize that, like, I'm already in construction mode once again, and I do have my mission and I do have my purpose for the company, and I do know why I'm doing it, but yet there is still this resistance. It's going to be hard. And I'm like, I don't need to do hard. And just the visualization one, what if it wasn't hard? What if this company, like, because all my young guns have already given me my numbers. I already know my metrics of like 10,000 units. I know what equity, I already have all my metrics, but you just allowed me to feel that in an easy way. Like I was actually visualizing all this happening and it was easy. And I was like, oh my, that is great. And so even with the mission and the vision, to your point, Britt, even with because I'm pretty darn clear on mission and vision, but the hardness has actually been a block. So I think even in this podcast of just trying on something different where it wasn't hard, because I just assumed it has to be hard, even if I accomplish, and even if I can do the stuff now, I still have a whole belief around why it needs to be hard. And I had that in my 20s and my 30s, which makes some great episodes. If you guys want to go back to season 1 with some conversations with Ryan about, why I had a second career. I was just kind of used and addicted to working my ass off, and really everything had to come super hard. That was definitely my thing for me. So this is just amazing, Britt. I really appreciate your time. I want to ask you kind of a final question as we wrap up here. So I was very fortunate that I was able to be a one-on-one, client of yours. Not everyone's going to be in the financial means to be a one-on-one client. So for those in the audience that maybe are just starting out, if somebody wants to be a one-on-one client, I would greatly encourage it, and we'll post, and feel free to give your information. But what about for those who maybe are a little earlier in their career and maybe they're not quite there? Do you have any books, or you kind of just laid out a nice little framework? Is there any other additional support you'd recommend? Yeah,
absolutely. So a couple things to think about. One is from this perspective, you really get that if your blocks are in the way, prioritize getting rid of your blocks. So often we're like, I need to get moving on building the business. From my perspective, no, you don't, because it will be 100 times harder. You will be struggling, you'll be fighting yourself, and you'll put in so much effort and get so little gain. And I think that's where people struggle. That's where people burn out. That's why people give up, because you're working 50 hours a week or 60 hours a week and getting 12 productive hours because you're fighting against yourself. And what I've found is, don't worry too much about building the business. Worry about getting rid of your blocks. Put the amount of, like, it's like a job, right? Put the amount of effort that you would put into your business into getting rid of your blocks, and you will break through so much faster. So that's just kind of number one piece of advice. Number two, go through this visualization, right? Go through the steps that I shared right on this podcast, and really start shifting some of these blocks and start to notice, right? Like, one of the things that was so beautiful, JP, about what you shared was you felt like it had to be hard. The minute the block shifted, part of how you know is you started thinking about what would it feel like for it to be easy. That was not accessible to you when you had that block. So start to notice the shifts, celebrate the shifts, feel the shifts. And as those shifts are happening, use that motivation and that energy now to go back and put in your business. So it's this beautiful, you think of a virtuous cycle. You look, you're blocked. You break through the block. Now you have all this creative energy. We watched that with JP. Literally, all of a sudden, he had this breakthrough about it not being hard. All he could think about was, now it's easy and now I'm excited. Use that energy and that motivation to go build your business. And then when you get stuck again, instead of fighting, instead of pushing through, go back to the drawing board. What are the blocks? Have the breakthrough, use that energy to go back and build the business. So now you have a completely different way of building your business, right? Versus being like, I have to do this linear thing, right? So that's my second, like.
Yeah. And Brittany, I would say from the work I've done with you too, like for me, like I'll probably do this post our episode, but when you anchor in the ease, like I just got a minute with you on this podcast and I was actually in a conference room, the numbers, everything was already done. Like it had already been accomplished and my shoulders just dropped. And I was really just enjoying myself. And that was like the first anchor. But I feel like with you, a lot of times, okay, so what does that feel like? And you'd say, so what does it feel like? You're in this room, your shoulders have dropped. And taking that, I know for me, having more of an anchor of how good it feels, it motivates the brain to want to move in that direction as well. So I appreciate it. And really anchoring in not only what identifying what the block is. I didn't know I had a block around it being hard until I knew it was there, but I didn't really think about it. And then really anchoring, what does it feel like when that block is removed, and just letting your body get some experience in that feeling is which is great.
It's literally, that's everything, right? Because and I don't want to get too into this, but from a neuroscience perspective, right, you have to think about how the brain works and the emotional anchors. Again, if we're being driven by emotion, if we have a negative association, that's demotivating. We're not going to want to act. So what you're saying is so important, right? And that's why it's like, when you have, the reason why I said the breakthrough is the motivation, because it's that feeling, right? That feeling that you get, that clarity, that vision. Now all of a sudden it's like you're feeling that, you're imagining that, and you're using that as you move into this next stage of whatever it is that you're doing in building your business or growing your business or selling your business, whatever it is. This is such an important piece of the puzzle. And I think so often we invest in our business, but we don't realize our business is an extension of us. You have to invest in yourself. And it doesn't need to be with me, but invest in yourself, whatever that means. It could be invest your time by actually spending time doing, this as an example, getting through your blocks. It could be invest in yourself by getting a coach. It could be, there's a million ways. Again, like whether it's with me or not, it's irrelevant. Invest in yourself. You are your business, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You are your business. And the idea that you're going to build your business without building yourself, it's like you are the missing piece. And so I just really encourage people, invest in yourself.
That sounds like a book title. You are the missing piece, Britt. I like that. Okay. So Britt, for those who want to find you and want to know more about you, tell them how do we find you?
Yeah. So I would say just go to brittlefkoe.com, BRITTLEF as in Frankfurt, KOE, brittlefkoe.com. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching, book a call. I would absolutely love to meet with you. yeah, you can kind of just learn about me there. My Instagram is a lot of travel mountain pictures. I spend a lot of time outside. Britt Adventures, one word, Britt Adventures is my Instagram. So if you want some really beautiful alpine lakes and mountaintops, follow me on Instagram. It's like my hybrid personal professional. That my identity is like, I really have both. So sometimes I post professional stuff, sometimes it's personal, but definitely follow me there as well if you're interested.
Awesome. Britt, last question. If somebody wanted to know more on this topic, is there a certain book that really influenced your life on beliefs or how this works? I think your father wrote a book. I'm not sure if you've written a book. Is there a book or two if somebody's just fascinated by this topic and wants to know more, or a website that you'd refer to?
Unfortunately, there's not. For me, this work has always, it really is me taking disparate data points from everything that I've learned, kind of putting them together. A lot of it is very intuitive. Like I've kind of just always known this from a really young age. So I haven't really like read a ton of mindset books. Again, like I'll pick things up here and there, but yeah, unfortunately I don't really have any great recommendations.
Terrific. Well, Britt, I so appreciate your time. Every time I'm with you on the phone, there's never a time where I feel like, oh my God, even in our friendship, it's a coaching session, and there's always, your soul will always level up. There is no finish line. And that's the other thing that I'm learning as well. It's like, oh, cool. Like this idea of keeping peeling the onion. I'm just really grateful to you for your friendship, for your work with me. That has also just brought me to more freedom and more peace and happiness, which was our original goal.
It was. That's what you wanted. You decide what success is. Whatever you tell me you want, that's what we work towards. That's what we do. Yeah.
Britt, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time together.
Thank you. This was so fun.